Okay, the presentation today has three sections. There is an overview where I'll be just going over some numbers, some of which you've already seen, and then I'll go into the estimates behind the different components of the estimate of the numbers. And then going a little deeper, we'll talk about the assumptions behind some of the more important elements of the estimates. This table contains some numbers that you've seen before. I'll start here. It lists provision in different sections or components of our estimating aside, and then it breaks it up by time period. The total estimate that you've seen, let's start with the number at the bottom in the first column of numbers, 137 million. I think you've seen that before. That's our estimate of the net cost to the state general fund of all the provisions of the ACA, including a Medicaid expansion, if there had been a Medicaid expansion in January 2014. The estimate was done over a long period of time, from fiscal year 10 to fiscal year 2022. Most of the impacts really don't start until 2014, but there were some provisions that were effective as early as 2010, and to capture all of the effects of the Act, we included the entire time period. The 137 million is made up of a lot of pluses and minuses. The Affordable Care Act has some provisions that save money, some that cost money, it has some that are mandatory, and some that are not. And so and that's really the explanation of the light blue lines in this table. The light blue lines break it down into mandatory provisions and optional provisions, and those that incur costs for the state, and those that involve savings. So starting at the top, over the entire time period, we estimated that the mandatory provisions of the ACA, these are the provisions that are in effect now, that will be in effect regardless of any decisions. These involve a cost of about $1 billion over the entire 13-year time period that we're looking at. In the second light blue line, these the ACA generates savings for the state that are actually slightly larger than the costs, and we'll go into more detail in a couple of slides about where those savings come from. The net effect of the mandatory provisions is savings of about $142 million over the entire 13-year time period. The pink line is to show the federal expenditures. It doesn't break it down into savings and costs. It's just a net figure of $847 million over the entire time period that's associated with the mandatory provisions of the ACA. The next two lines, the second set of light blue lines, relate to the optional provision, which is essentially the Medicaid expansion. If there were a Medicaid expansion beginning in January 2014, the estimated cost to the state was $1.6 billion over the entire time period. The savings, $1.3 billion, for a net cost of that decision of $280 million. That is, there are savings that will occur, net savings, $142 million in the dark blue line at the top. The decision to expand Medicaid over this time period would, we estimate, cost $280 million. The $137 million at the bottom is the net of those two. As I said, most of the numbers in this first column have been seen before, and we've, of course, had these numbers calculated for every year of the 13 years the time period we're looking at. For the first time, we've broken it out by time periods that are relevant, perhaps, for decision making. All the years wouldn't fit on the slides, and we can certainly provide them, but they won't fit on the slide. So the second column of numbers here is the time period where really there's no decision to be made. It's most of the time period is behind us, and the part that isn't, there isn't time for a Medicaid expansion to occur in what remains of state fiscal 2014. the third column, or the second column of the breakdown, is the upcoming biennium. This is the first time period for which there is a decision that could be made. And the third column is the remainder of the run out. The reason we ran it out to 2022 is that the ACA has a phasing period, and that phasing period ends during the biennium that ends with state fiscal 2022. Now, before we go into